Millionaire catches Black Maid protecting his special child. What happens? Next is shocking. Beneath the polished walls of a billionaire's mansion, secrets can be darker than anyone dares to admit. To outsiders, his wealth promised safety, comfort, and perfection. But behind closed doors, a quiet storm brewed: suspicion, prejudice, and mistrust. His Black Maid was seen as nothing more than help, silently judged, silently endured. Yet, one night, when the millionaire decided to test her loyalty, what he discovered would shake him to his core. Because sometimes the people we dismiss the most are the ones holding everything together. And in this house, a truth was about to surface that no amount of money could bury. The mansion stood like a fortress on the edge of the city, towering glass windows and marble floors that gleamed with a kind of cold perfection. Inside lived a man who had everything money could buy: luxury cars, private jets, and an empire that stretched across continents. But for all his wealth, there was one thing he could not control: his only child. Born with special needs, the boy required constant care, patience, and understanding that money alone could never provide. To fill that void, he hired a maid, an older Black woman named Evelyn. Her presence was quiet, her footsteps light, her hands calloused from years of unseen labor. To the millionaire, she was little more than an employee. He convinced himself she worked for the paycheck, that her patience was a mask, and that her loyalty was conditional. But Evelyn knew something he didn't. Each day, as she guided the child through lessons, helped with meals, and soothed him through storms of emotion, she saw what others overlooked. She saw not a burden, but a boy desperate for love, a soul craving safety. Still, whispers circulated in the household. Some relatives mocked the idea of leaving a child in the care of someone like her. Others questioned her intentions, hinting that loyalty could never cross the boundaries of race and class. And the millionaire, influenced by those voices, began to doubt her too. Unaware that his suspicions were about to lead him down a path of revelation, he decided to watch her more closely. And in his quest to expose her flaws, he would discover something far more powerful than betrayal, something that would force him to face truths he had long ignored. The days in the mansion followed a rigid rhythm. Staff moved like clockwork, ensuring everything remained pristine and silent. Yet Evelyn's work was anything but ordinary. Her focus was not on the polished silver or the endless dusting of furniture, but on the boy, David. He was 7 years old, small for his age, with wide, searching eyes that often darted toward the floor when strangers entered the room. His world was fragile, filled with routines that calmed him and sudden storms of fear or frustration that few could understand. Evelyn had learned those rhythms. She knew which foods eased him, which songs steadied his racing thoughts, and which small gestures gave him comfort. She was patient in ways that only love, real, unspoken love, could teach. But to the millionaire, watching from a distance, these quiet acts went unnoticed. What he saw instead was a woman who lingered too long, who grew too close, who seemed to give far more of herself than her position required. Suspicion gnawed at him. The whispers from relatives fueled his doubts. Further, at family gatherings, comments laced with prejudice were dropped casually, like daggers hidden in conversation. How much does she really care? She's only here because you pay her. Don't forget, loyalty doesn't come from her kind. Words like these stuck, weaving themselves into the man's mind, until Evelyn's dedication began to feel like something else, something dangerous. He began testing her. Small, calculated trials. He'd leave money loosely tucked in bookshelves, jewelry on countertops, fragile objects where a careless hand might knock them down. Evelyn never touched them. Instead, she'd quietly tuck valuables away or leave. Them as they were, focused entirely on the boy, Yet the millionaire remained restless, unable to shake his doubts. Meanwhile, Evelyn carried her own burdens. She knew how she was seen. To many, she was invisible until mistakes were made. To some, she was little more than her skin, her uniform, her role. But she endured, not for approval, not for status, but because David needed her. In him, she saw her own grandson, a boy she rarely visited because she worked long hours to provide. She poured into David the love she couldn't always give at home, knowing children like him were often overlooked, dismissed, or treated as less. One evening, the millionaire arrived home earlier than expected. He paused at the top of the stairs, looking down at the quiet scene below. Evelyn sat on the carpet, her legs folded beneath her, while David leaned against her shoulder. She was reading softly from a book, her voice steady, her tone filled with warmth that wrapped around the boy like a blanket. David's eyes, usually restless, were calm. His breathing slowed, his fingers clutching the fabric of her sleeve. The sight should have softened the millionaire. Instead, it unsettled him. In his world, affection was transactional, loyalty was purchased, and people served out of duty, not devotion. Why then did Evelyn seem to give so much more? Was it genuine, or was it a performance, an elaborate act designed to secure her place? His doubts hardened into a plan. He would stop observing from a distance. He would catch her off guard, test her when she least expected it. He would discover the truth, not just about Evelyn, but about the unsettling bond she had built with his son. And so, with suspicion burning hotter than ever, he set the trap that would change everything. The house was silent that night, its vast, halls echoing only the faint hum of appliances and the ticking of a distant clock. The millionaire sat in his study, pretending to be asleep in the leather chair, but his eyes remained half open, fixed on the hidden cameras he had installed earlier that day. Every angle of the living room and David's bedroom was visible on the glowing screen before him. Tonight, he would learn the truth. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Evelyn moved through the house with her usual quiet rhythm, tidying the kitchen, checking doors, and finally settling into David's room. The boy stirred in his sleep, whimpering as though trapped in a nightmare. The millionaire leaned forward, waiting. Would she ignore him? Would she break her facade? Instead, Evelyn knelt at the bedside and gently stroked David's hair. Her voice, soft and steady, whispered words of comfort. The boy calmed, but moments later his breathing quickened into panic. He thrashed, crying out, a storm of fear that had haunted him since birth. Evelyn didn't flinch. She held him firmly, yet tenderly, humming a tune that seemed to anchor him back to safety. The millionaire's chest tightened. He watched as the boy clung desperately to her, whispering sounds only she seemed to understand. Evelyn stayed by his side for nearly an hour, never once growing impatient. She wiped his tears, whispered encouragement, and finally rocked him back to sleep in her arms. For the first time, the millionaire saw his son's fragility laid bare, and the immeasurable strength it took to protect him. This was not duty. This was not performance. This was love, selfless and unshakable. The realization struck him harder than any betrayal ever could. The woman he had doubted, the one he allowed others to belittle, was the only person who truly saw his son. And in that moment, the walls of his prejudice began to crumble. Morning light spilled across the mansion's corridors, but something had shifted within its walls. The millionaire emerged from his study, no longer looking at Evelyn with suspicion, but with an unsettled weight, pressing against his chest. He had seen the truth. All the whispered doubts, the careless words of relatives, the prejudices he himself had allowed to take root. They shattered against the image of a woman who had given more to his son than he ever had. Yet guilt came with clarity. For years, he had hidden behind wealth, convinced that love could be outsourced, that loyalty could be bought, but Evelyn had proven him wrong. What he dismissed as mere employment was, in fact, devotion deeper than any contract could bind. She didn't see David as a burden. She saw him as a child worth protecting, worth nurturing, worth loving despite every challenge. In the days that followed, his perspective began to shift. He spoke less of suspicion and more of gratitude, though the words often caught in his throat. He noticed the subtle sacrifices Evelyn made, skipping meals to feed David on his hardest days, enduring long hours of patience that would exhaust anyone else. For the first time, he saw her not through the lens of class or race, but as a human being whose heart was immeasurable in strength. The transformation wasn't immediate, nor was it easy. His pride resisted, his past habits whispered otherwise. But deep inside, he knew the truth had changed him forever. Evelyn had not only protected his son, she had exposed the blindness in his own soul. And so, the story of one night became a quiet turning point in a household built on wealth, but saved by compassion. Because sometimes the greatest revelations don't come from boardrooms, bank accounts, or power. They come from the overlooked, the underestimated, the people society is too quick to judge. Evelyn's love was not just for David, it was a reminder to all of us. How many lives have we misjudged because of skin color, class, or circumstance? And how many truths have we missed simply because prejudice blinded us? The answer lingers, urging us to see differently before it's too late.